Mm. What up, everybody? How's it going? This is yours truly, YouTube Live, Rama screen covering movies, TV, and entertainment. And I'll be back giving you a few new movie reviews tomorrow. But right now, I want to give you or share with you my thoughts about this topic. It went trending on Twitter yesterday, or for the past 2 days, I should say. Did this happen yesterday or the other day before yesterday? Well, anyway, it was hashtagging like crazy. Quentin Tarantino snaps at a reporter, and as you know, those of you who followed me for quite some time would know that I am a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino. I think, as far as filmmaking or screenwriting goes, nobody writes like Quentin Tarantino does. That guy knows how to come up with or how to construct or how to structure dialogues like hundreds of like long dialogues, okay, that runs hundreds of miles long, and sometimes the actors would say it like in a speed that's like 100 miles an hour, kind of like Aaron Sorkin does that too. But Quentin Tarantino has its own perks. And so I'm a big fan. And when I heard that he snaps at a reporter, my first thought was like, because something about Margot Robbie, because they have this press conference at Cannes to promote his new movie, the ninth film by Quentin Tarantino called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Great trailer, by the way. You should see it on YouTube. So they had this press conference. Obviously, I wasn't there, and um, the news came from there. Like, oh my god, he snaps at a reporter and over Margot Robbie, and my first thought was like, okay, maybe Quentin Tarantino was defending Margot Robbie. Maybe this reporter talked shit about her in that room, like about her performance or whatever, right? Because I remember 2 years ago, I would say, no, not 2 years ago, maybe longer than that, maybe four years ago. Anyway, um, whenever the movie The Imitation Game came out, remember The Imitation Game starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley? And they premiered that movie at Toronto Film Festival, and I saw their press conference on YouTube. And one of the reporters said to Keira Knightley, "Wow, you look bored, or you look exhausted." I think that's what they said. You look exhausted. And obviously, she did look exhausted. That's a very tiring promotion that she and Benedict have to do for the film throughout that whole week. But that's not a nice thing to say. And so Benedict Cumberbatch, being a gentleman, he kind of snapped at the reporter. "You look exhausted. How dare you say that? She looks beautiful." Like, yeah. And then Kira like, "Yeah, f you." So and of course, it didn't get too heated. But I thought it was, I thought this whole Quentin Tarantino snapping at reporter I thought it was gonna be in that same vein. Sorry, let me turn off my phone. Um, I was like, okay, maybe somebody talked smack about Margot Robbie and Quentin Tarantino came in her defense. But no, that's not the case. And you've probably already read it online, either at Vulture or whatever, or Entertainment Tonight, or watched the video online. The reporter was criticizing Quentin Tarantino for the fact that Margot Robbie, who plays Sharon Tate in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, for the fact that she does not get to say enough lines, or she doesn't have enough lines in the movie. And so the notion is that, hey, Quentin, you've written a lot of, let me give you the exact quote by the reporter here. And I'm reading off of refinery29.com. All right. And I quote, "Quentin, you have put Margot Robbie, a very talented actress, in your film. This is a person with a great deal of acting talent, and yet you haven't really given her many lines in the movie. I guess that was a deliberate choice on your part. I just wanted to know why that was, that we don't hear her actually speaking very much." And Quentin Tarantino's calmly said, "Well, I reject your hypothesis. That's it. That's all he said. And the media made it out to be, oh, he snapped at the reporter, by the way, is females. Oh my god, oh shit. Did you see that Quentin Tarantino just like raised hell on that female? No, dude, what the hell? Quentin Tarantino was very calm. There's this debate right now going on, like, oh, Donald Trump snapped and he went on temper tantrum on Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and instead of talking about infrastructure, he's like, oh, how dare you said that I did a cover up, and then hours later, Donald Trump had his staff tell the reporters like, "Oh, our boss didn't have temper tantrum. He didn't have temper tantrum. He was calm. He was calm. He was very composed." And we know that's bullshit because Donald Trump is a freaking child. In this case, we have evidence that Tarantino he didn't go on with temper tantrum. He was very calm, and he just said like, "Okay, I hear you, but I reject your hypothesis." That's it. Go see the video for yourself. So I reject the fact that the media calls it snap. I used snap in this in the title of this video, not as a clickbait, but this is the point I'm driving you, that the snaps thing is overblown. It's not snap. If anything, it's snippy maybe. Um, Firm reply. He could have elaborated some more, but he chose not to. But far, far, far from being remotely close to snappy. So that's one of the first point I want to make. So the media's trying to create like, oh, like Tarantino hates women, he hates female reporters. Haha, he didn't give Margot Robbie enough lines. He must hate women. Like, okay, guys, calm down. You see the video. That's not, he didn't snap. So you're trying to make this out to a bigger proportion than it is, actually. Let me read to you. And afterwards, Margot Robbie, who sits next to him in that press conference, she responds to the female reporter after Quentin Tarantino said, I reject your hypothesis, very calmly. All right. And Margot Robbie says this, and I quote, let me give you the context. Sharon Tate is a very tricky character whenever she is put on the screen. And she's been portrayed by several actresses over the years. Tricky because of the surrounding, circumstance, because of the circumstance surrounding her murder, the Charles Manson thing. She was like, I forgot how many months pregnant, and she was the wife at the time of the director Roman Polanski, who during that time or during that era, Roman Polanski was a rising star and filmmaker. He was like the I don't want to make comparison, but anyway, like he was like coming up and making very successful films one after another, and then this happened, and so over the years, whenever Sharon Tate gets portrayed on the screen, there has been pushback either from Polanski, who himself, as you know, is in legal trouble because he allegedly raped an underage girl and has been on the run ever since. So pushback from him, his wife, his current wife, and pushback from the Tate's family, because they don't want memories of their beloved Sharon to be misconstrued or misinterpreted on screen. So that's the context, right? I'm giving you that. And so here's Margot Robbie's response in defense of Quentin Tarantino not giving her a lot of lines in the movie to respond to the reporter. And she said, and I quote, I think the moments that I got on screen gave me an opportunity to honor Sharon. I think the tragedy was, like Brad Pitt mentioned, ultimately the loss of innocence. I think that can be done without speaking. I think I did have enough time to explore her character, even without dialogue specifically, which is an interesting thing, as I often do look to the interaction with other characters to inform me on the character. Rarely do I get to spend so much time on my own as a character in a day to day existence. That was an interesting thing for me to do as an actor. I really appreciated the exercise. I felt that I could deliver what I wanted to on screen. Okay, so let me give you my thoughts. I have some notes here. First off, firstly, let's put it that way. Firstly, um, the idea or the thought suggesting that Tarantino may see actresses even as talented as Margot Robbie as second class on the screen to Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. That thought is ridiculous. Because if you see the historical context over the many movies that he's done in the past, there's no evidence to that. Historically, like, dude, he made Kill Bill movies with freaking Uma Thurman as the lead, and guess what? Uma Thurman is a woman. Pam Grier is the star of Jackie Brown, Quentin's movie. And there's a lot of strong female. Freaking Jennifer Jason Leigh. The Hateful Eight. She got nominated for that performance. So, um, you may argue like, hey, the reporter is not probably suggesting like, hey, do you have something against actresses? Like, I think the reporter speaking as a fan, you can argue like, hey, the reporter speaking as a fan of Margot Robbie, and she wanted to see more of Margot Robbie in the movie. Now, to be clear, I haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Um, I don't know when the screener will be or the press screening will happen in LA. I'm sure I'll be there when it does. So I can't judge the movie at this point. I can only judge it based on the historical context, like again, of what Quentin has done in the past. And again, if you argue like, hey, she's speaking as a fan, and I'm sure Margot Robbie fans would be like wondering, hey, how come we don't get to see our idol speak a lot of lines in the movie, or how come our idol doesn't get so many scenes in the movie? And that's a fair argument, fair question. If you wonder that, and my counter argument to that is that over the years there have been cases also in many movies in which actors or actresses of big names, right, not up and comers, big name A-listers, Oscar nominees or Oscar winners, who would show up in said movie for a few minutes or for a few scenes. And they would still, and they're still gladly, and they're still happy to do so. They're still happy to do so. Like, for example, Avengers Endgame, we have Michael Douglas showing up just for like 2 scenes. Very short, man. Not even 2 scenes, probably 1 scene. And okay, so are we gonna have a reporter asking the Russo brothers, hey, how come you only have Michael Douglas for 1 scene there? You do know that he's won multiple Oscars over the years, right? Like, he's a big name. Like, come on now, come on. so so it's not a rare thing for a big name to show up in a movie for just a few scenes or a few seconds. Another example, because everybody's right now buzzing that Margot Robbie might get Oscar nominated for her supporting performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which again I haven't seen, so I can't judge her performance or her movie yet until I screen the film. But everybody's that screened the movie at Cannes, they're like, "Oh my God, Margot Robbie should get Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress," and I'll be like, "Hey." My reaction to that is like, hey, I would not be surprised. Margot Robbie was amazing as Tanya Harding, and if she's amazing as Sharon Tate, as everybody said she was, then she deserves an Oscar nomination. But we'll get to that bridge. But here's another example: Judy Dench. Judy Dench, um, who by 1998 has been in so many stuff, gigs, movies, TV. Has had a long career. And guess what? He won. I mean, she won Oscar. Sorry, not he. She won Oscar for just a few minutes of scenes. Not even in Shakespeare in Love. I mean, so it's possible that Margot Robbie doesn't get enough lines or doesn't show up enough in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and yet she still leaves an impression, a big mark, a big dent in that movie. That is possible. That is possible. All right. So, I think the reporter. I want to assume or theorize that she's speaking as a fan. If I were a fan of, because I've done, and you, my fellow YouTubers out there, would kind of, you know what I'm talking about when I say this. Sometimes we critique a movie, and then the movie would feature our favorite actor or actress, and we feel like they're not utilized enough in the movie. And then we'll put that in our review. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. You know, you have this opportunity to cast somebody as great as Jack Nicholson, and you only use him for like 2 seconds. Jack Nicholson was underused or underutilized. You know, he was wasted. He was wasted, and we've used that before in critique. The last time I used that was Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep in Mary Poppins Returns. Do you remember that Mary Poppins Returns this past December? Meryl Streep only shows up for one scene, and I was like, "What?" And I think my criticism about that is that not only was she underused and wasted her talent, but also that whole sequence involving her was a big distraction from the story at hand. It did not really contribute anything to the journey of Mary Poppins Returns and the kids. But I can go on and on and on about how shitty that movie was. So yeah, my point is we've been there, right? We've critiqued the movie because our favorite actor or actress was not fully used, in our opinion, by the movie or in the movie. So I think that's where the reporter's coming from. She comes in like, oh my God, I'm going to be able to write, in my review, maybe a couple of, maybe one paragraph about Brad Pitt, one paragraph about Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, and then another paragraph about Margot Robbie. And now it's like, shit, that third paragraph is nothing because she doesn't show up enough. Well, here's what I say to you, reporter, and this is not to demean the reporter by any chance. Again, that maybe you need to dig deeper. If she doesn't have enough lines and she doesn't show up in many scenes in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but you still want to review her performance, then review her performance for that, for what she offers within those few spaces. Dig deeper, critique it, not based on the lines or the words that she says, but based on how she delivers it and how she executes Sharon Tate on the screen. So how about that? I'm sure you can do that. I'm sure you can. We believe in you. So again, this is not to shoot down the reporter at all, but I'm just saying that again, number one, there's no historical context that Quentin Tarantino thinks little of female actresses or female characters. No, none whatsoever. He made Jackie Brown. He made Kill Bill. Come on, guys. So there's no such accusation. Such accusation, if there's any, is baseless. I remember there was this controversy on Twitter when Uma Thurman released the video back when they were shooting Kill Bill, a video of her driving the car and crashing, And of course, luckily, she wasn't too badly injured. She was injured, but not like fatal or anything like that. Um, and I read the article on that, and Uma Thurman said, that and I'm paraphrasing this. She had an amicable conversation with Quentin Tarantino, and Quentin Tarantino was very regretful in, asking her to do that driving instead of a stunt driver in her place. And Quentin Tarantino even allowed her to release the video publicly because Quentin has had that footage, all these years. So there's no indication that Quentin Tarantino is misogynist or anything like that, off and on the screen. Now, if the female reporter um, were to question Lars von Trier, Lars von Trier, the filmmaker, the provocateur filmmaker, Antichrist, Nymphomaniac, and last year the House That Jack Built. If the female reporter asks Lars von Trier in Lars's press conference, "Hey, how come you have all these great actresses, Charlotte Gainsbourg and and Riley, I forgot her name. You have all these great actresses in your films, but how come all the female characters in your films, get tortured, or they always get a bad ending, and depressed, and they get their clitoris cut in Antichrist, and it's just like nasty stuff happens to you. Why are you so misogynistic to the women in your films?" Now, if the female reporter asks that to Lars von Trier, and Lars von Trier says, I reject that hypothesis," then I would be on the side of the female reporter. I'd be like, "No, Lars, you can't reject her hypothesis because you have this history, you have this historical context. People can see your movies, and the female reporter would be right in saying, 'Hey, I see this pattern. You always belittle your female characters in your movies. What's up with that? Do you have something against women?'" That would be a valid, understandable question to ask somebody like Lars von Trier, because I want to know too. Like, wait, what's up? What's with you, man? What's with you? But the question of like, "Hey, how come you only give Margot Robbie a few lines, to Quentin Tarantino?" And if the idea is to like, and then the media runs with, "Oh my God, Quentin Tarantino snaps at the reporter." No, he's just, he's responding in a very calm, firm way. All right. And if you're suggesting like, "Oh, he thinks little of female characters in his movies," there's no history context to that. And again, as I mentioned again, for one last thought, that the fact that big A-lister Oscar nominees sometimes names or faces would show up in a movie for a few minutes or few scenes, few seconds, that is not an uncommon thing. All right. And in the case of Margot, we'll see once I see the movie, once you see the movie, we'll get to judge whether or not she deserves Oscar nomination for those few scenes in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It can happen. It happened to Judi Dench. It can happen to Margot Robbie. So that's my long rant here, in defense of Quentin Tarantino. You may not like Quentin Tarantino, and that's fine. You may hate his movies, and that's fine. We can have disagreements about. I know people have had disagreements with me about the fact that Quentin Tarantino, in his script for Django Unchained, he used a lot of N words. Django Unchained has so many N words. I think Cat Williams was really angry at Quentin Tarantino about that. I saw Cat Williams was really pissed off. He spoke to TMZ when the movie came out. And my defense at that time was like, "Hey, N word is bad word. I don't condone such language. If my friends say it, I'm like, wait, whoa, take that back. You can't be saying that shit. Not just that, or whatever derogatory word against any ethnicity." But my defense for that is like, whoa, this is a movie, this is art, and Quentin Tarantino is not about PG-13. Um, he wants to emphasize the brutality of slavery and everything that comes with it during that era. And And you can argue, hey, how come there's N word in, I don't know, the Green Book last week? I mean, last year, the Green Book also has N words. Oh, should we go down on the people there too? Sometimes it's just a creative choices thing. Maybe he shouldn't have. Maybe he shouldn't have used so many N words in Django Unchained. Maybe he could have like pulled back a little some. But he's not about PG-13 films. He's about R-rated, both language and violence. That's his style. And Quentin will never go for anything less than be brazen in his approach of storytelling. Um, so that's another example. I just remember now the Green Book. When people is like, ho, 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 the Green Book. How come the story, whitewash? And I watched the movie twice. I was like, okay, the story is told from the angle of Viggo Mortensen's character. He's the lead. That's why Mahershala deservingly won his Oscar for Best Supporting. He was a supporting actor in that one. Um, if you see them too, as like, oh, it should be a Mahershala Ali story, the Don Shirley story. It should be that. Okay, go make that movie then. But that's not the movie that was made last year. The movie that was made last year was, about this guy who had racist tendencies, and then he befriends this guy that he's hired to chauffeur around. Um, Viggo's character was elite. So in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, again, I haven't seen the movie, but that's also an argument that can be made that the leads are Leo and Brad Pitt. That's how Quentin Tarantino wrote it. He can make another script, another movie with Margot Robbie as the lead, but in this one, Margot Robbie is the supporting actress. Sharon Tate is more in the background, or more of a backdrop, the Charles Manson thing. And it's no secret. It's been reported that many times. This is not about the Manson murders, okay, everyone. The Manson murders is just a backdrop. And to close, Quentin Tarantino also actually had permission from the Tate's family, and he had close discussions with, I think, Sharon Tate's sister, I believe, throughout the filming production of the film. So yeah, that's my long rant defending Quentin Tarantino. Um, in this case, on this topic, I think a lot of people who have their headlines, just like mine right now. Oh, Quentin Tarantino snaps, I think they are exaggerating, and they are there just for the clickbait, and they want to make controversy surrounding Tarantino that is not there, that does not exist. Because historically, he always thinks fondly about female characters, strong female characters in his movies. So that's it. That's my defense. I just gotta get it out there because I can't wait for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Oh, I can't wait for Sony Pictures to send me the screening, the invites to that screening. So when that comes, I'll let you know my thoughts about it. So stay tuned for my review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Thank you so much for tuning in on this special live edition of my editorial or opinion. As always, subscribe, press that like button, ring that bell, and if you can help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. That's patreon.com/ramascreen. Let's rock this.